could you start just by saying your name, your age, and what pronouns you use?
I'm Lee, I'm 22, and I use they, he pronouns.
And do you identify as queer?
I do.
Do
or
you...
should I say I identify? I identify as queer. For me, queer and femme definitely intersect. For me, being femme is a lot about performance. The best way that I've been able to put into words the way that I like to act and the way that I like to present myself, I liken a lot to the way that drag queens liken and perform femininity. So for me, there is an inherent queerness in that, both in the way that I play into these dynamics and the ways that I like to present and the way that I think of that.
And could you talk a little bit about like your personal style, like how you describe how you dress?
I've always liked to describe the way that I dress as kind of dress the way that I would want to dress up like a doll. I feel like the outfit I'm wearing today is not the best representation of that, and I can pull out some of my favorite clothes to maybe show that if you want to.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I will pull out my favorite dress. I like to liken the way that I dress to kind of like little dress-up dolls, kind of porcelain dolls on most days. And I definitely see the way that I dress and the way that I like to present myself as an art in itself too. So not only do I like to think of the way that I dress as the way that you dress like a little doll or something, but a lot of the times I also think to myself, would this make a good drawing? Would this, like, is this something that I'm going to draw later and be proud of? So definitely that. I like to put a lot of personal style into that, and I like to present myself as someone quite eccentric, if that makes any sense.
To get cut off.
Yeah.
So when did you first start using the term femme to describe yourself?
I've always dressed pretty femininely. I've always used clothing and makeup and ways like that to describe myself. I would say I first came across the term femme in terms of like butch and femme back in 2021 on Tumblr. There's a large subset of lesbians on that website who created art, who wrote like think pieces and talked about that, and that's how I first got into that community. And I had strayed away from the label for a while as I kind of figured out a lot of like the nuances of my own gender, and I met other people and kind of discussed it more, and I came back around to it, more specifically the term high femme, around a year ago, and I'd say that's the most comfortable that I've sat in, is that specific high femme label, and that added nuance to it is the way that I'd say I'm the most comfortable. I feel like that was ostrich a little bit, but I feel like that
I like, because it added a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what do you do on the daily to feel femme? Like, what are your, like, femme rituals? Like, what do you do to feel the most you?
Again, I really liken my femininity to a lot of a performance. Not just for myself, but for other people. I am very thorough with the way that, like, I have, in a way that's a bit comical, like I have a egregiously long skincare routine. I take way too much time to get ready, to the point like my friends kind of make fun of me for it, and that's become a bit of like a bit. I let myself act a bit ditzy at times and almost like comically feminine, really to play into that role, especially in friendships with other butches and other femmes. I let myself be comfortable in that femininity as well, and I really liken it as well to femme as in lesbianism itself as a sort of political ideology as well, and I do that with a lot of like decentering like men and a lot of like heteronormativity in my life, and really part of that activity is really surrounding myself with as many queer people as possible, and as many lesbians as possible, and as many people who understand that nuance of my identity as can be as well.
Have you faced any adversity, misogyny, homophobia, like any type of femmephobia from your personal expression?
Definitely. And for a long time, I kind of lived in my own bubble with it. I went to an alternative high school where in my school district it was a safe haven for a lot of queer people. So, and then for the first 2 years of my college, I went to an art school. So I didn't really start facing a lot of that adversity until I transferred colleges. I'm currently at Ohio State, and I definitely see from a perspective now with being around less and less queer people, that interesting adversity that comes with it. I've definitely changed the way that I dress. I don't dress as eccentrically as I used to, out of fear of the ways that people would comment on things. People have said really interesting things to me just out in the open, even other queer people. And I also face a lot of that adversity in my own relationship, and the friendships that I had with non-femmes. Another place I solely think that queer and femme intersection lies especially is the way that I think that dress and act comes into that, where that's inherently seen by people as irregular. Like a lot of the clothes that I wear, even from other queer people, they're like, oh, that's a lot. And for me, there's definitely been some backlash with that. And definitely in my friendships as well, even with other non-lesbians, and even certain lesbians who are outside of the subculture of butch and femme can sometimes have a hard time digesting that, especially in the ways that gender roles play into the butch and femme identity, where a lot of people don't understand that it's a reclamation rather than working with those gender roles that are classically presented. So it's definitely interesting.
You notice you're received as a femme person, and like how other femme people are received, just like socially?
I think, again, it really depends on the style. A lot of the femmes that I'm friends with really lean into that more eccentric style. A lot of femmes that I talk to also kind of describe themselves as almost doll-like. And for a lot of them, it is a very, very much a performance as well, which a lot of people don't seem to understand. And I think there's a big difference between femme as in like F-E-M and femme as in the French word. And a lot of that comes down to the ways that you interact with other people, and just the kind of personality that you put into that. So I think there's an interesting kind of distinction to be made in that. So a lot of that, when it comes to butch and femme identity, I've seen a lot of people, even other queer people, liken it to like, oh, you are just conforming to those gender roles. When for me, in like romantically, platonically, it is anything but. And it's a lot about the reclamation of that in a queer context that I don't think a lot of other relationships you get from that. You get that. Yeah, it's definitely an identity that has been hard to really come to an understanding of outside of lesbian spaces, which I think is interesting, especially even with younger lesbians. I see less and less younger lesbians identify with butch or femme, and a lot of the interesting conversations that I've had on femme identity and on butch and femme identity have been with queer elders, especially those who were very active in like the 80s and 90s. Here's some of my favorite books. Nagata Kabi is one of my favorite lesbian authors. Her main work is My Lesbian Experiences with Loneliness. But all of her other works really touch on that feeling of lesbian identity as well. Kind of the lesbian holy grail, Dykes to watch out for, and personal claim to fame is having a personal signed copy. And I like to mention it to as many people as I possibly can. A lot of my pieces I get from Japanese websites. I take a lot of inspiration in my dress from, I like pull parts of things like Lolita fashion, of Gyaru fashion, like Morike fashion. Not as like I wouldn't say that I dress Lolita or dress as like Morike, but rather like kind of take little aspects of it. So these are both Japanese pieces. And I especially like the Lolita style of dress because of how doll-like it ends up being. This is another one of my favorite dresses. Peter Pan collars are forever my favorite thing. But yeah, when I am buying something, I kind of ask myself, would a little porcelain doll wear this? And if the answer is yes, I will buy it. I'm also very into vintage fashion as well. And I'm more so a casual collector, but definitely kind of taking pieces and seeing where I can go with them. Like that. Oh, this is my favorite piece. This is a kindergarten teacher's apron from Japan. And yeah, it's supposed to be worn as an apron. I've always worn it as a little dress. And yeah, it's definitely my favorite. And
Your name, your age, and your pronouns.
Yes, so my name is Kristen. I'm 27 years old and I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you. And do you identify personally as queer?
Yes, I consider myself bisexual. Not queer yet.
And then how do you think being queer and identifying as femme intersect for you at all?
I would say I associate being femme with being attracted to women. That's sort of how I first heard of that term, is within like the lesbian community as sort of the companion word to butch. So then I first encountered that in that dichotomy. So I feel like it's really tied to lesbianism, being attracted to women.
And then how would you describe your personal style when it comes to how you get dressed?
I would say it's very like bricolaged. There's like a lot of different parts and pieces that I take from different things that I like. So a little bit fetishistic, a little bit like Harajuku kind of. Some 70s and 80s are really, or 60s and 70s rather, both eras that I really love to find clothing from. So yeah, lots of different sources.
And then when did you first start using the term femme to describe yourself?
That's a great question because I can't really remember. I would assume probably when I was a teenager, when I first sort of had that queer awakening, you know. And I found all these terms that you can use to describe yourself. So I would probably guess when I was like an older teenager when I found out sort of.
I'm going to ask the question again just because you got caught. So what do you do on the daily to feel femme? Do you have any like personal rituals to make you feel that way?
I would say that makeup is a big part of my daily routine. That's an expressive thing, so I have a pretty big collection and I love collecting stuff. And, so I would say that's probably the biggest thing that makes me feel more like myself, more human. So.
And then have you faced any adversity, misogyny, homophobia for your personal expression as femme?
I would say a lot. Presenting femme is sort of, you get the sort of misogyny stuff that like, a lot of women get. Thinking of a time when I was living in Chicago and I was on my way to go to a second date with a woman. It was kind of a fancy date, so I was in a little cocktail dress with heels that getting on the L train to go to my date. Definitely got some mild, harassment from dudes on the platform and on the train. I think presenting that way makes men kind of think that they have implicit permission to comment on you. The irony being, of course, I was dressing that way to impress a woman.
Have you noticed is the general reception of people who identify as femme in the public eye?
I guess, and I'm totally just talking out of my ass here because I guess my impression is that sometimes people think that if you look femme, you're not really queer, you aren't really attracted to women, or they think that maybe you're like more passive or like the passive partner if you dress in a feminine way. Those things aren't necessarily true.
Hi, my name is Sarah Carr. I'm 29 and my preferred pronouns are she, they.
And do you personally identify as queer?
I do, yes. So far as queer means other. I would say I probably didn't really identify as queer until like I was 27, something like that. And surprisingly, it's like it became easier for me to see myself as queer through fashion, actually.
Does being queer and identifying as femme intersect for you? And if yes, like, could you talk about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it does, because it's still at the end of the day a choice for me. I think I'm so cognizant of my sexuality and my gender fluidity that choosing to embrace the body I was born in and expressions that are maybe more traditional in our society is a conscious choice, but at the same time there are other things that I do that differ from those like traditional expressions. So like choosing to put the femme forward, I think it's probably more of a constant for me. It's like the main pillar, I would say, around which I construct my gender and sexuality. But they definitely overlap, I would say. Yeah.
And so, how would you describe your personal style when it comes to fashion?
I would say a little schizophrenic, honestly. Very eclectic, very thrifted, very spontaneous. I would say dusty. I love Southwestern things, sort of Chicano inspired. I studied French and Spanish in school and literature, and so I'm very aware of cultural heritage and the way that it can come through in fashion. Also punk at times, bohemian, like world inspired. But very much like I actually noticed this the other day when I had a day off and I had a bunch of errands to run, like starting from the morning all the way till the evening, and I changed my outfit 4 times, like completely. Like I started the day off with some old 90s Nikes and some like whitewashed jeans and a big Outcast sweatshirt. That was the morning. And then I came home and I went into some joggers and an Adidas sweatshirt, and then by the nighttime I was in skinny jeans, cowboy boots, and a vest. Like I just go all over the place. It's very much according to my mood. But I love art, I love fashion. I'm a very passionate and emotional person, and so pretty much wherever my emotions are taking me, whatever style I feel expresses how I'm feeling in any given moment is how I'm gonna dress. But I would say like dusty, Western, somewhat mask as well. That would be like the punk part, but very eclectic. I don't know, I'm all over the place.
So, when did you first start using the term femme to describe yourself?
Yeah, I would say it coincides with embracing my queer identity in general and my sexuality. I think growing up in a conservative city, Dublin, Ohio, is not the most agoraphobic town in all of the United States, but certainly leans conservative, and my family does in particular. So really not having access to other queer people, to really understanding what that meant, it took me a long time to recognize that in myself. So I think embracing the terms just really came with meeting other people and being like, oh, that's me, that's been me this whole time. And I think there's such a liberation that comes with that, and it's why for me fashion and gender expression is so they're so connected, because I think you can wear any fucking thing you want in whatever situation as long as you're confident in doing it. And when you know who you are and you tap into your authentic self, that's where the confidence comes from. And so then however you choose to express that in your clothes, like that just, it unlocks this layer of confidence, and I think it's so attractive to people. They can just tell that like you are expressing your essence, and if you are still trying to discover your identity in any of these capacities, like it's a journey. And for me, it was always like I was exploring a lot of things through my fashion. So yeah, it's been great being able to intersect those things. So there's like parts of my core self that I want to express that are masculine, but I think sometimes I lean into those a little more because I'm so sensitive to the male gaze. And so when I'm particularly rebellious and I don't want to attract that and I want to sort of rebuff it, that's when I might actually dress more masculine, because it is part of who I am, but at the same time, I don't want to express to men that I am available for them to objectify. And so, like, ironically, I actually feel the most femme when I'm like wearing shoulder pads or wearing something that's like baggier. Like that brings a level of confidence to me that I feel fucking invincible. Like you can't touch me. Like, I mean, I've been touched. I've been like all these things from certain things that I wear that like seems to invite certain unwanted behaviors. And so when I'm able to just express a different side of me that's like, I actually am not interested in you at all in that regard, that's like the best feeling. But in terms of like, it's just how I wake up. It's the music I put on in the morning. It's whatever. Like,
have you faced any adversity, misogyny, homophobia, any kind of aggression for your personal expression?
Yeah, a few times. Nothing egregious, I would say, compared to maybe what others have experienced, but it would be more just like verbal comments. I did have my head shaved for a while. I wore my hair very short, pixie style, and I remember the first time I came back with my hair like that, my dad started calling me butch. I would get messages on my social media like, are you a lesbian? You know, just like random comments that aren't necessarily offensive because like I have nothing to hide, but like the way that it's asked is kind of like, oh, you look this way, are you a lesbian now? Or like, oh, do you like girls? And it's like, you know, these were coming from people when I used to live in a much smaller town, so like I knew they meant it in a certain way. I remember one time, so I lived in France for a few years and I was walking around in Paris and I had my head shaved and I was just wearing probably something a little more baggy. It's probably some fucking shoulder pads because I love shoulder pads. And I'm literally walking down the street and this guy's looking at me, he's walking towards me and he just locks eyes with me. And I'm like, I'm not fucking looking away, dude. Like, if you're gonna look at me and try to objectify me, I'm gonna fucking watch you do it and make you know that I see what you're doing and it's not okay. So I'm just like staring at this dude as we're getting closer. And I feel like because of my presentation, my demeanor, the fact that I was holding his gaze and I wasn't really intimidated by him, he like walks up and he's like, lesbo? Like, vous êtes lesbien? And I was like, what the fuck kind of comment is that? Like, we're strangers passing the street and you're asking me, vous êtes lesbienne? Like, That it makes no sense. It's totally unsolicited. What makes you think that I don't care because I am gay? But like it, yeah, it was just it was very interesting. So not terrible things certainly, but definitely just making assumptions about my person based on. I mean, I could be totally not those things and be this way as well. So it's just I think people feel that they have the right to make assumptions about you or ask you personal questions they have no business knowing because you look different, and they think it gives them the right to interrogate your otherness. Just shit like that. It's definitely a tendency to like belittle or condescend, or to try to assess how much leeway they can get in like abusing the power dynamic. Like if you're a femme person and you don't check all the box for what society might expect you to look like or behave like, people perceive that as an opportunity to maybe take advantage of you in some regard or to push your buttons. Like I have a couple coworkers that are femme but don't present in the same way that others might consider femme, and so like customers will come in and they'll just treat them slightly differently. They'll be a little more condescending. They might even like pat them on the back if they pass by, and it's just totally like uncalled for. So I feel like docile, like we're still, we've made progress as a society, but I feel like there are still certain behaviors that indicate that someone who's femme should still behave, should be still submissive, should not act out or draw attention to themselves or be too outspoken. It's like, at least in the circles that I frequent, that's still like a problem. Yeah.
What I think so much for me comes out of being femme is the relationship that I have with other lesbians, especially with other butches, and I think it is an interesting identity in the way that I personally believe that femme does not exist without butch. Butch can exist without femme, but femme cannot exist without that. And so much of that identity is important to me by interacting with my community, whether that be in person or online. I feel like community is so important in this identity, and I think that's another distinction that comes from like femme as like a way of dressing and femme as an identity, is the way that you interact with other people in your community. So for me, it's also been a way to meet other queer people, both in person and online, and for me to create art with people.